When Claire booked her solo trip to the Philippines, she was trying to forget a face, her ex-fiancé's, caught in a betrayal that shattered her world. But after visiting a remote island locals called Cursed, she began to forget her own. One morning, a stranger in the market dropped his groceries just looking at her. A child screamed. And when Claire finally looked into the mirror, the face staring back wasn't the one she left home with. What did she awaken on that island? And more importantly, what followed her back? Claire's sandals sank into the warm, white sand as she stepped off the ferry in Siquijor, the Philippine island rumored to hum with ancient energy. Her eyes swept across the horizon, craving something she couldn't name, not just peace, but erasure. It had been 6 months since the scandal. 6 months since she had opened that envelope containing photos that redefined her past 5 years. Her fiancé with her best friend. Her apartment, packed and sold. Her world, inverted. She had planned this trip as a reset, but as soon as she stepped off that boat, something in the air shifted, like her arrival had been expected. She booked a beach hut with a thatched roof and hammocks swinging under palm trees. By day, she wandered open markets, feasted on mangoes, and tried to forget. By night, she drank alone under a canopy of stars, the ocean sighing like a grieving god. The locals were warm, but cautious. They spoke to her with wide eyes and hands that always seemed to form quiet symbols after they said goodbye. One evening, a group of children gathered near her hut, whispering a rhyme she couldn't quite catch. She followed the melody and heard the word Isla Maldita repeated like a lullaby gone wrong. When she asked about it at the seafood stall the next day, the vendor dropped his knife. His eyes hardened. "That place is not for you," he said. "People go, but they don't come back right." Claire laughed it off, thinking it just another ghost tale, like the one she read as a kid. But the name kept surfacing, Isla Maldita, the cursed island. The more she heard about it, the more obsessed she became. It wasn't on any map, but the locals knew of it. Always spoken with unease. A place touched by the forgotten. Her curiosity bloomed like a bruise, dark and spreading. Maybe it was the heartbreak. Maybe it was the loneliness. Or maybe it was that itch, the one that lives in those who've been broken, the desire to touch something even more haunted than themselves. On the 5th day, she found herself in a dimly lit beach bar, drinking a third rum cocktail, when an old man with clouded eyes sat beside her and whispered, "You want to see the island? I know a man." She didn't respond right away. But she didn't say no. That night, her dreams were vivid, a woman's silhouette underwater, hair floating like seaweed, eyes open and waiting. When she woke, her skin smelled faintly of salt, though she hadn't swum in days. And on the mirror in her hut, written in the fog, "Don't look back." She wiped it away, heartbeat thrumming. But the next morning, it was there again. The boat was smaller than she expected, barely more than a skiff, its paint chipped and hull groaning with age. But the man piloting it, called Tito Ramel, had the kind of face that had seen too many storms to fear one more. He said little, only nodded when Claire asked if this was the way to Isla Maldita, then motioned for her to get in quickly, as if time itself would turn on them if they delayed. The water was mirror still at first, but as they cut through the waves, the clouds above seemed to gather like witnesses. Claire had a GoPro strapped to her wrist and a satchel of essentials slung over her shoulder. Water, a first aid kit, a drone she hadn't yet used, and a worn paperback on Filipino folklore she'd picked up at a flea market 2 days earlier. The air changed an hour into the journey. It became cooler, thicker, harder to breathe. Birds stopped following. Even the sun's light dimmed, though it was just past noon. Tito Ramel murmured something in Tagalog and then spit into the ocean 3 times. Claire, trying not to let anxiety take root, began filming. Day 1. Journey to the island no one wants to talk about. Let's see if it's as haunted as they say. Tito looked at her sharply. No jokes. Not here. His voice cracked like dry wood. Then, without warning, the island appeared, not on the horizon, but suddenly, shockingly close. It rose like a secret exhaled from the sea itself, cliffs jagged and dark, vines draping the rock face like veins. There was no dock, only a crescent of black sand where the jungle met the shore. Tito refused to get closer. He cut the engine, threw a makeshift anchor, and handed her a small waterproof bag. "You go. I wait until sundown. Not longer. Claire waded through waist-deep water, camera bobbing, until her feet touched land. The moment she stepped onto the beach, the air went still. No wind. No birds. Not even the buzz of insects. She turned to wave at Tito Ramel, but he had already turned away, back hunched, fingers pressed to his lips in a trembling prayer. The jungle in front of her wasn't thick, but it was unnatural. The trees were too symmetrical, the shadows moved too fast. She walked slowly, her boots crunching on bones, or maybe roots, she couldn't be sure. The deeper she went, the louder the silence became, like sound had fled. Then came the markers. Totems carved from driftwood and coral, adorned with shells and human teeth, hanging from branches with frayed red string. She documented each one. Every time she pressed record, the screen glitched. Then the buzzing started. Not bees, not flies, but a low, electric vibration that filled her skull and made her teeth ache. She stumbled into a clearing and found a pond, still, silver, unnaturally reflective. On its surface, her reflection rippled, then smiled. Only she hadn't. She staggered back, heart racing, and dropped the camera. When she picked it up again, it was dead, battery drained despite being fully charged that morning. She backed away from the pond and turned to leave but couldn't find the trail. Every path looked identical now. And behind her, somewhere deep in the brush, something was breathing. Not an animal. Too slow. Too deliberate. She didn't run. She couldn't. Her limbs felt syrupy, her thoughts looped in static. Then she heard it, a whisper, right by her ear, "Welcome back." She turned, but no one was there. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred. Finally, she emerged from the trees, soaked in sweat, cuts blooming on her arms like warning signs. Tito was there, eyes wide, shaking his head as if he'd seen a ghost. "I told you sundown," he hissed, pointing to the sky where twilight already burned. Claire climbed aboard, silent, still clutching the camera. As they pulled away, she looked back once. A figure stood on the shore, or maybe it was a tree, but its outline stayed long after they turned the corner, and in the pit of her stomach, Claire felt something follow. Claire returned to the mainland with sand still clinging to her skin and seawater in her ears, but she felt like she had left something crucial behind, or worse, brought something unfamiliar back with her. That night, her dreams were laced with distortion. Blurry faces smiling too widely, waves that whispered secrets in languages she couldn't understand, and always the figure by the pond, standing too still. When she awoke, her hut was colder than usual, and the mirror above the sink was inexplicably fogged over despite no shower or boiling kettle. She wiped it clean, but her reflection came into view slower than expected, like it had to catch up. Her face looked different. Not dramatically. Just enough to disorient her. Her eyes seemed too far apart, the line of her jaw too angular, her skin tone ever so slightly off. She blamed it on poor sleep, dehydration, maybe sunstroke. But when she passed a group of children on the beach later that morning, the youngest one burst into tears. His older sister pulled him away, muttering, "That's not a lady. That's her shadow." Claire stood frozen. At the market, the stares became more frequent, more alarmed. One vendor, who had been friendly just 2 days ago, now crossed himself when she approached. "You shouldn't have gone there," he whispered, not meeting her eyes. "Your face, it doesn't know what it is anymore." Claire fled back to her hut, heart thundering. She grabbed her camera and began reviewing footage from the island. Most of it was corrupted, static, green flickers, and harsh audio pops. But one clip had survived, the moment she reached the reflective pond. In the video, her face hovered above the water. Then, for a split second, her reflection blinked before she did. She rewound. Played it again. The same result. Over and over. Her reflection had a will of its own. Shaking, she opened her phone's selfie camera. For a second, it wouldn't load. Then her face appeared, distorted, barely noticeable, but undeniably wrong. Her left eye drooped slightly lower, her lips thinner than they'd been days ago. She pulled out an old photo from her passport wallet and held it up beside the screen. The difference wasn't huge, but it was there. She posted a photo to Instagram with a filter and vague caption, desperate for someone to notice something odd. But comments rolled in as usual. "You look amazing," one friend wrote. "Something different about you," another added, with a fire emoji. Then came the DM, from an anonymous account. "You were warned. It shows in the face first." That night, she noticed a fog forming again on the mirror. Not from steam, not from breath, just appearing. She watched it this time, her breath shallow. Words began to form in the condensation. "It wants your name." Her scream was swallowed by the walls. She ran outside to breathe, to clear her head, but even the night air felt heavy, clinging to her skin like a second layer. She tried to book a flight back to the States, but the airline app froze each time she confirmed her departure. She used a different device, a different browser. Each time, the screen flickered and closed. Desperate, she went to an internet cafe, but the booking site redirected her over and over to blank white pages. She wasn't tech illiterate. Something, or someone, was stopping her. On the fifth attempt, the screen filled with a grainy still image of her own face. But the eyes were completely black. That was when she noticed something else in the reflection behind her, a blurred second face hovering just behind her left shoulder. She whirled around. No one. But the weight of invisible eyes remained. That evening, a neighbor left a bundle at her doorstep. Beetle leaves, garlic, ash, and a crudely folded note. "You must leave before the third mirror fogs." Claire didn't understand what that meant, but the note smelled of smoke and desperation. The third mirror. She had 3 in the hut: bathroom, vanity, and a small compact in her travel bag. She hadn't checked the compact. Hands trembling, she opened it. The glass was already fogging. By the next morning, Claire was unraveling. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and her face no longer looked like it belonged to her life. Something about her expression stayed tense even when she tried to smile, and her pupils seemed to expand unnaturally when she passed anything reflective. At sunrise, she stuffed a bag with the bare essentials: a flashlight, a knife, her passport, the compact mirror she now wrapped in cloth, and the crumbling journal she'd found tucked beneath the wooden planks of her hut's bed the night before. The journal's pages were stained and warped, filled with handwritten entries in a mix of English and Old Visayan. From what she could translate, it belonged to another traveler, decades ago, who had come in search of the woman beneath the water, a spirit who gifted beauty at a cost. The entries began curious, adventurous. Then they became pleading. The final one was almost illegible, scratched in panic. "She walks with me now. Her eyes are mine. The pond never lets go." Claire closed the book and knew what she had to do. She had to go back. Not for thrill. Not for content. But because whatever had attached itself to her had a tether, and that tether was Isla Maldita. She found Tito Ramel again, this time near the edge of the mangroves, where he pretended not to see her. "I need to go back," she said. He refused, didn't even look at her. But when she pressed a wad of pesos into his calloused palm, his resistance softened. "If you go again," he said, "you won't come back the same. You think it's your face. But it's your soul she mirrors." The boat ride was colder this time. The sea wasn't just dark, it was metallic, like the sky had poured mercury into the water. Claire didn't film. She didn't speak. When the island appeared again, it wasn't sudden, it was expectant, like it had been waiting for her. She stepped onto the beach and immediately noticed the air had changed. The trees no longer whispered, they stared. Branches twisted unnaturally in her direction. The pond was still there, but the water no longer reflected. It was black, a perfect void. Around it were symbols etched into the ground, circles within circles, marked with broken teeth and cracked glass. She followed the path deeper into the jungle and stumbled into a clearing where remnants of stone huts stood in crumbling defiance. Inside one, she found another journal, older, sealed in wax, beside a wooden mask carved to look like a woman's serene, symmetrical face. The mask's eyes were hollow. When Claire picked it up, she felt a cold shock travel through her hand and up her arm, like dipping into a forgotten memory. She sat on the stone floor and opened the wax-sealed journal. Its language was ancient, but a note tucked inside was scrawled in modern English: "She offers what you most desire, but she keeps what you never knew you had." Suddenly, the air thickened. She turned and saw eyes watching from the trees, Wide, glassy, human but empty. They didn't blink. They didn't flinch. They just stared, dozens of them, some in the trees, some behind roots, some impossibly close. She backed away, tripping, scrambling to flee, and then found herself back at the pond without ever turning. It was calling to her, humming in her skull, vibrating in her bones. She saw movement within it, not fish, not shadows, but faces.
Familiar, unfamiliar.
All distorted. All versions of her. Some smiling, some weeping, one screaming soundlessly beneath the surface. Claire fell to her knees, clutching the wrapped mirror. She wanted to smash it, to bury it, but her hands wouldn't obey. A pressure filled her skull, like invisible fingers pushing from the inside out. She screamed into the sky, and the pond rippled in reply. From the forest came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, barefoot, slow, deliberate. She stood and turned. The woman from her dream stepped into the clearing, wet hair dripping, skin pale as bone, wearing Claire's smile. Not just similar, identical. The woman didn't speak. She merely raised a finger and pointed toward the pond. Claire understood. The reflection had escaped. What walked among people now wasn't just a ghost, it was a replacement. And if Claire didn't stop it, she would fade like the journal authors before her. Forgotten, rewritten, erased by her own shadow. Claire didn't run, not because she wasn't terrified, but because it wouldn't have mattered. The jungle warped time and space, footsteps led nowhere, and the island bent reality like steam in a mirror. Instead, she stood frozen as the figure that wore her face inched closer, every footstep soundless, every motion smooth and rehearsed. The woman tilted her head, the teary smile unwavering, and for a flicker of a moment, Claire saw something beneath the surface. Sadness, maybe, or hunger. Before she could react, the wind returned in a sudden gust, and the figure vanished, melting into the trees like smoke. Claire spun, heart hammering, and bolted toward the beach, tripping over roots and debris until the familiar outline of the shore came into view. Tito Rammel's boat was gone. Either he had left her or something had sent him away. But someone else was there, standing ankle-deep in the surf, an old woman dressed in red cloth, her face lined with more years than Claire could fathom, yet her back straight, her eyes alert. She didn't flinch when Claire approached, panting, pleading. "You've been marked," the woman said flatly, as if confirming something already known. "You touched what was meant to be left alone. Now she sees you." Claire begged for help, asked what she needed to do, how to undo it, how to get her life, her face, back. The woman introduced herself only as Aponglina and turned without another word, beckoning Claire to follow. They walked through a different path into the jungle, one Claire hadn't seen before, though she now understood the island reshaped itself for every soul it trapped. Aponglina explained the legend in hushed tones. Centuries ago, a woman known for her beauty had been drowned by jealous villagers who believed her charm came from dark spirits. Before her final breath, she cursed the land, not with vengeance, but with desire. Anyone who sought beauty in what should not be seen would attract her spirit. At first, the curse was passive. Then the world modernized. Vanity became easier to feed. Tourists came with cameras, with egos, with restless souls. The curse, once dormant, began to feed again. "She doesn't steal your face," Aponglina said. "She reflects your wounds. And if you don't face them, she takes what's left." They arrived at a hidden clearing where a circle of stones surrounded a massive, polished slab of obsidian embedded in the ground like an altar. "This is the original mirror," the woman whispered. "The only place you can confront her." The ritual, she explained, was dangerous. Claire had to relive her deepest betrayal, unfiltered, vulnerable, watched by the island. If she lied to herself, if she flinched, the spirit would take her fully. Body, memory, voice, and wear her like skin. The full moon was hours away. Aponglina prepared the circle with herbs, ash, and blood from a chicken she slit without ceremony. Claire sat in the center, trembling. As night fell, the obsidian began to shimmer. Fog curled around them. The jungle silenced. Claire's heartbeat became the only sound. And then the vision came, not a memory, but an immersion. She was back in her old apartment, the envelope in her hand, the sound of the door clicking shut as she entered early from work. The smell of his cologne. The laughter. The way her knees buckled before she even saw them. The betrayal unfolded again, and this time, she didn't run. She screamed. She broke. She sobbed without filters, without pride. She let the pain rot through her. The mirror pulsed. The ground shook. A scream echoed, not hers, but the spirit's, raw and furious. Then silence. Claire collapsed. The jungle wind returned. Lena rushed to her, eyes wide. "You broke the illusion," she said. "But she's not gone. You only severed the bond. Now you must leave, before she returns to reclaim you." The moon had begun to dip. The window was closing. Claire followed Lena through a narrow path that glowed faintly with moonlit fungi, sprinting until they reached the beach where, miraculously, Tito Ramel had returned, eyes darting and hands trembling as if something had chased him back. They pushed off the shore just as a shriek erupted from the tree line. Guttural, vengeful, not of this world. The sea swelled violently, and for a moment Claire saw a face rise from the water's surface, just beneath the waves, staring at her with her own eyes. Then it vanished. When the island disappeared into the mist behind them, Claire felt a part of herself go quiet. Not healed. Not whole. But no longer being hollowed out from within. Claire awoke on a hospital cot 3 days later, wrapped in blankets that smelled of iodine and seawater, surrounded by white walls that hummed with fluorescent light. A nurse glanced up and gasped, nearly dropping the clipboard in her hands. The look wasn't one of relief, it was confusion, tinged with fear, like Claire was a puzzle that didn't quite fit the frame. The attending doctor entered next, his expression unreadable. "You were found unconscious on the shore near Dumaguete," he said, flipping through a chart. "Your passport says Claire Holloway, 32, American national. But the search party had called off your case weeks ago. You were declared missing 27 days ago." Claire sat up slowly, her bones aching in strange places. The last thing she remembered clearly was the scream from the island, the ocean swallowing her name, and the way her reflection in the boat's wake had looked back with unfamiliar intent. Her face felt taut, raw, like it had been peeled and pressed into a mold. The hospital mirror had been conveniently removed for safety reasons, but Claire noticed how the staff avoided her gaze, as if holding it too long might invite something they didn't want to see. Once discharged, she tried calling her family, but her voice cracked unnaturally on the line, like static creeping into every syllable. Her mother cried with relief but paused mid-sentence. "Sweetie, is someone there with you?" Claire was alone. The line cut before she could answer. In the hotel she checked into using her passport, which was oddly dry and unstained despite everything. She avoided mirrors entirely. But reflections found her anyway. In elevator doors, in puddles, in the gleam of her phone screen when it blacked out. And each time, something was slightly off, her eyes taking too long to blink, her lips twitching without input, or a delay in her movements that couldn't be explained by fatigue. On her last day in the Philippines, Claire visited the embassy to sort out travel paperwork. An official eyed her warily as he scanned her passport and cross-referenced her with their missing persons file. "There's a note on your file," he said. "You were reported as found once before, in 1987. Same name, same birth date, same hometown. But that Claire Holloway was never retrieved. Vanished without a trace." Claire stared at him, heart sinking into her stomach like a stone. "That's impossible," she whispered. But the official only shrugged and handed back her documents. "It happens. These islands have strange records." On the flight home, no one sat beside her, though the plane was supposedly full. She tried to sleep, but her dreams were cluttered with fog, whispers, and a face that molded itself from 1,000 others. After landing in LAX, customs flagged her for a secondary inspection. The agent took one look at her and hesitated. "You look familiar," he muttered. She smiled politely, but her lips felt rubbery. Just a face in the crowd. When she got home, things didn't go back to normal. Her apartment, sublet while she was gone, now smelled of rain and burnt jasmine. Her friends barely recognized her. They hugged her, but stiffly, like she was wrapped in glass. Her best friend, Jenna, sat across from her during coffee and finally blurted, "Claire, I don't want to sound crazy, but you look like you're pretending to be you." Claire laughed, but the sound came out wrong. Later, when she tried to record a video explaining her story, just to document it for herself, her camera glitched every 5 seconds, her face warping in the playback like melted wax. She deleted the footage. One evening, she passed a child on the street. He stopped, stared, and asked his mother, "Why is that lady wearing someone else's face?" The woman shushed him quickly and pulled him away. Claire stood still, hands shaking. In the weeks that followed, she stopped leaving the house. Mirrors remained covered. Her phone rang at odd hours, and sometimes, when she answered, the voice on the other end matched her own, but spoke in a dialect she'd never learned. She began dreaming in Tagalog. She began craving saltwater. Her face stayed intact, technically, but nothing behind it did. Then one morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a photograph, a still shot of her standing on Isla Maldita's beach, but taken from behind. In the picture, her shadow was missing. Only the outline of a woman, smiling at the camera, with Claire's face and black eyes. The note beneath it read, "You left too late."